Uh, Before I upload the next video, I'd like to make it a point to say that I have an interest in the alt-right movements, in the sense that if you take the alt-right movements as a prototyping movement, then you can alter the statistical output of certain divisions within particular countries and determine based on new methodologies and new methods the continual expansion of one new item to another new item intellectually, then statistics will alter. Now, I'm aware that statistics is a field that is currently being hotly debated, has been for a few years now at least, as one of the lingering but still expanding fields of scientific inquiry to a great analytical degree. And with the fact that new items can still be created, that essentially creates an addition to each statistical point or piece. And so this is why I'm interested in the alt-right movement, because essentially these are human resource sectors, a sector for human resources that the name itself is fairly benign. It has been going since maybe the early 90s. I wouldn't entirely be sure of the accuracy of that statement. But as it has been going a while, and of course there is the alt right movement that started in a minor movement that started in France in the 90s, I believe. The surname of the man is de Benoist or something of that nature. The New Right movement in France. So as this has been going a while, it's still made new additions to it over and over again in different iterations. If we use iterations as a slightly null word in this case, just to demonstrate the fact that there can indeed be iterations without it being too explosive. Hence, I suppose the word iteration does make more sense in that context. As it makes more sense in that context, we can see that with the problem with the information technology sectors in the modern day and people's attitudes and mindsets being very scatterbrained, it seems that we do use technology to utilise ourselves to a better degree or extent. But what we do require is fresh input in the human pool of expression. I believe that part of my efforts have contributed towards this, but I also think that multiculturalism is also mixed with colonialism in modern day terms, simply because we're interested in expanding further beyond the reaches of this simple planet, but we still have political dregs to clear up, and it is causing further strife for the global populations, with extortion being widespread but politically justified and socially acceptable, or deemed acceptable in the minds of many of the uh, prerogatively, shall we say, called what we may call drones in society. Of course, drones isn't a term that I usually use, and it isn't a term that I endorse or believe in. I've never really used it up until this point. It isn't even a swear word, I wouldn't say. Um, However, obviously, with the imaginative advent of robot ethics since the 1950s of by famous science fiction authors, it is possible that drone may actually become a negative word in the future. Hence, we cannot know everything because knowing everything would be a static application. However, we can ascend to the probability and the prototype of knowing more and essentially knowing everything within a certain mind frame or mindset which expires after a certain time but still defends itself in the future. Now, of course, in a sense, this relates to leadership because leaders are trying to still establish themselves in a fading future. A fading future where they ask themselves questions relating to spirituality and religion and science and how these combine. Now, of course, the most valuable commodity in a sense is knowledge itself, the things that people know and the things that people don't know. As this is a commodity, we would assume that anybody who plants themselves firmly on this earth would be utilising this commodity either as an offensive or to their defence. But more pragmatically speaking, I would say that usually commodities of this nature of knowledge base are used as defence, hence it is more pragmatic than we would usually accede to. And so what we have is a pragmatic defence against knowledge by the fact that we take away from our own aptitudes by knowing less, but knowing more about our own defence mechanisms and the commodities that encircle us around this earth, and how we can implant new leaders into different population centres using the knowledge that we have acquired and accrued as a human population as a human race so that we can expand further into the galaxy, shall we say. That distance becomes less of a factor that is against us as a priority if we can manipulate knowledge in a way to say that prototyping has a greater emphasis in intellectual property than it ever did before, and that things that are new are valuable because they relate to novel planning processes in the mind, neurologically, technologically, synaptically, or otherwise, whatever terms you may want to put it in. So there may be cases to be made against stereotyping, and of course we still live in an age where stereotyping is ever so on in the increase. We stereotype, but we also prototype. Now, of course, these two words are not synonymous, nor would they necessarily pop into the mind unless there's some kind of aptitude or orientation towards rhyming words or even rhyming slang, which is obviously something that does populate the alt-right spectrum, is that the use of language is becoming an increasingly insecure faculty for these people. Now, of course, if we can't manipulate language properly, then we cannot really manipulate prototyping properly, and so it may be said that most of what's happening globally can be seen as a prototype, but it is sure and steady, rather than an, as is said, strong and stable, even though that is a useful terminology. And different population centres can figure out the depths of their leadership and increase their statistical prominence, and so there should be monetary gains to be made in the political spectrum, as politicians seem to be hidden in our pocket for most of our time, most of our life on this earth, from childhood to adulthood and so on, and etc. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it.